and welcome to episode 4 of the preview show as we look ahead to tonight's game against Lincoln City in what will be Paul Cook's first home game in charge of the Blues. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Sky Sports News reporter for the Northwest, James Cooper. James, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Dan. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. There'll be a lot of viewers actually watching this who probably don't realise that they probably recognise your face but don't realise you're an Ipswich fan, so just give us the background on that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, they're my boys. There's no doubt about that. And one of the curses in what I do is I get to watch these incredible games involving Manchester United or Manchester City sometimes. And yet when the ball hits the back of the net, it's not your team. And my team is Ipswich Town. And it's been like a little bit like having a cross to bear over the last sort of 5-6 years. Very, very difficult. And people looking at me with sympathetic eyes. But I think, in terms of the heritage, I grew up in Cable St Mary at a time when, Ipswich Town were the best team in Europe. One of our most famous websites, Those Were the Days, is about exactly that. Those being the days when we were the best team in Europe. And not only that, growing up alongside them, Sir Bobby Robson lived down the road. Paul Cooper was 2 doors down in Cable St Mary, and there were players in and around the village all the time. So it was a really special place. And I guess what most Ipswich Town fans will tell you is that, I don't think anyone kind of gave it the credibility that it had right then and didn't realise really what they were living, because I think if you told them 30 years on from now that they've been in the third flight of English football, dreaming of nights like they got used to, it's a shame. But, so many great memories, and just a shame to say that we're in the place we're in at the moment, but hopefully now looking up at least.
And just to say there'll be a lot of people who do recognise you from Sky. Just you cover for the Northwest, don't you? Largely Manchester United, but also City as well.
Yeah, I work an awful lot with Manchester United, so I think those people who watch Sky Sports News will probably see me talking about the transfer window from various car parks around Manchester, either at the Etihad Stadium or Old Trafford, or speaking to Ollie or speaking to Pep or some of those players there. So, it is great and it's fun and it's exciting, and it's the best patch probably in the world in terms of football, because you've got these 2 big hitters on either side of the city. But as I say, the curse is, I love watching them and it's beautiful and it's fun, but it's not Ipswich Town Football Club.
Never truer words spoken.
You've got a dream job, really. That's what I'm telling you.
So, what have you been able to watch much of Town this season on iFollow?
I mean, the difficult thing about that has been, often they're playing at the same time as United City. So I'd be actually doing work watching most of the United games. So I've watched bits and pieces in terms of live, and I've watched all the highlights and the goals going in, both for and against. And I think, the one thing is that Ipswich Town have got this huge following. I mean, I think Paul Cook will know now. You smashed the iFollow record at the weekend with almost 6,000 people. These are big figures. This is a club with a lot of backing and a lot of fans who desperately want the good times back. And I think what hurts me is seeing, as I say, Ipswich Town in the third tier of English football. And it is such a lottery. I mean, you go to the games, week in, week out, it's an absolute battle. And you've got experienced players who are trying to find their way. You've got youngsters who are trying to find their way in empty stadiums. It's a really difficult time at the moment. I'm not making excuses for anything that's kind of going on, but it's not easy for a team that wants to play football, who has that kind of pedigree of playing football, when, like Saturday showed you against Gillingham, they were up for the fight, they were up for the battle in the way that we weren't. So, yeah, it's difficult right now. And I think hopefully with new management and with 15 games left of the season, 45 points, it's a third of the season left, then maybe we can get that trajectory going and hopefully sneak into the playoffs.
What did you make of Paul Cook's appointment? A positive one with the supporters. How have you seen that, James?
Yeah, I mean, I loved him as a player and like him as an awful lot as a person. Obviously he plied his trade up here, firstly with Accrington, then Chesterfield a little bit down the road, and of course Portsmouth and Wigan. And with all those clubs, has kind of promotion attached to him, got all those clubs into the league above. So I think he has that credibility, and I think he has that the temper, and he knows how players work, and he knows what players want and what they need. And Gary Roberts coming with them is fantastic, because I think 18 months at Ipswich Town, a really, really cultured, skillful player. I was sad when he left the club. So, I've got to know him a little bit at Wigan, and he's a really decent person. And likewise, Paul Cook. The football he had Wigan playing when they narrowly missed out on staying in the Championship was absolutely fantastic. I think the question is whether he can work quickly enough to bring those kind of miracles to Ipswich Town, because it's a big job right now. And I was slightly surprised at the weekend that he didn't get perhaps the reaction he thought he would from those players. But I think is it 6 games in 19 days, and then Tuesday's 7 games in 22. I mean, it's just bang, 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 bang. So you can't be too harsh on them.
Yeah, exactly. He made no no secret that he was disappointed with the manner of the performance on Saturday away at Gillingham, but not making excuses or anything. And Paul said he wasn't making any excuses because it's the same for every team on this hectic schedule. But he came back from Accrington on the Wednesday morning, 3:30 in the morning. Players had the Wednesday off, and then not many trained on the Thursday for recovery. It's such a tight turnaround. There's barely any time for Paul to try and implement and get his ideas across to the team.
Yeah, I think that's the hard thing, and I think Town fans will be wondering what changes he's going to make, in this game against Lincoln City, and I think they're quite right to. And I think he talked about a player coming in from the outside the 18, and I think a lot of Town fans would like that to be perhaps a young player. I think it's more likely that he'll look at experienced players like of Emma Hughes or Cole Skews when they're fit, or Ollie Hawkins. I think they're the sort of players who maybe get you out of this battle. And one of the kind of things that people aren't telling you about stadiums with no fans is the bigger stadiums are, the emptier they feel, and the harder it is to play in these games. It's not easy. You'll be at them in the stadiums. It's not an easy watch. I know everyone wants to be in the stadiums, so it's hard to kind of say those things.
Yeah.
But it really isn't easy playing football when it's empty. And as I say, a big place like Portman Road, if things aren't going well, it just looks like this huge empty space, and almost the sound of silence becomes difficult to play within. So I think it'll be interesting to see what he does. As you say, he's got no time, and I think the way managers' minds tend to work, I think he's probably looking at the games against his former teams in Portsmouth and Wigan and thinking, I've got a week between them. I've got to get there, hopefully scratch around and get some results between now and then, but then do that week on the grass, and you start seeing Paul Cook's Ipswich rather than this kind of hybrid Paul Lambert, Paul Cook Ipswich, which time and constraints like that mean we're getting at the moment, perhaps.
Just moving on to Lincoln, James, they've probably been one of the surprise packages, but sitting third in the league at the moment, games in hand on Hull, who are top of the table at the moment. But as much as we say they're a surprise package, they're really there on merit. Michael Appleton's done a brilliant job, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. He's a fantastic coach. He schooled in the right way through Manchester United. I mean, he was there pretty much with the class of '92 and counts the Nevilles as his friends, Nicky Butt, David Beck and Ryan Giggs. They all know Michael Appleton. He's from this sort of part of the world, and he's schooled in the right ways of playing football. I think the other thing about Lincoln City is it's one of those team names that just makes you shudder as an Ipswich Town fan, because you go back to 2017 in the FA Cup, the 2-2 draw at Portman Road, then you go to Sincil Bank and suddenly it's 1-0, you're out of the FA Cup. They're into the fourth round, I think, for the second time in their history or something like that. And that's where I think everything really set in terms of kind of Mick McCarthy and the fans thinking, hang on a moment, we're in a downward spiral rather than an upward trajectory. And I think, that was the difficult thing. And that was, I think, when it kind of felt as though, from an Ipswich Town fans' point of view, help, we're in quicksand at the moment. Can we get out of it? And we didn't get out of it, and we went down to the third tier. But in terms of this Lincoln City side, they play in the right way. The game earlier in the season, I think both sides would have been happy with a draw. I think it was fairly even, and the fact it was won by a contentious penalty after Teddy Bishop was fouled at the other end of the pitch, a more obvious foul than the foul for the penalty. But that's the way things have been going for Ipswich at the moment. So I think it's going to be tight. But I mean, two teams trying to play in the right way, which sounds like a cliche, but in League One, as most Ipswich fans will testify, not all teams want to play in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly Gillingham did.
No, yeah, absolutely. The Town's task will, I say, made a lot easier, but Lincoln are without their top goal scorer, George Grant, who's got 13 goals, 10 assists. I think Michael Appleton said after the game on Saturday that he'd be amazed if he plays again this season. So, you're taking out 23 goal contributions there right away, but they've got dangerous players all over the pitch. They chip in with goals all over the park.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I was reading on the website this morning from one of the Town fans saying, look, it's going to be great because this is a real opportunity to beat Lincoln City because they're missing these players. Liam Bridcut as well, their captain. So Grant and Bridcut going, two big players and two big leaders within that, and three other key players as well. So 5 players down. But none of those 5 players played at Crewe at the weekend when they won 3-0. That's a really impressive result against a Crewe team that blows really hot and cold, but can play some fantastic football and cause you problems. So I think there is an opportunity there, but we need to see a better Ipswich Town and a more battling Ipswich Town than we perhaps saw at Gillingham at the weekend. And I think probably the big key question that Paul Cooks will think is, how do I change it round? And how do I get some energy into the bodies that I need to use again? Because there didn't seem to be a lot of energy. Maybe being back at Portman Road will be a good thing. And I feel sorry for him in a sense that, it's been lovely hearing someone like Paul Cook say what an honour it is to be Ipswich Town manager, and to remind us how big we are as a club. That's great to hear. You can't hear that enough about Ipswich Town, that they don't deserve to be in the third tier. But equally, it would be really nice to think that the stadium would be full and they'd give a proper welcome to Paul Cook. And as I say, all you're doing is walking into this cavernous stadium and hoping you get a little bit more out of your players than you did on Saturday.
Yeah, as you say there, he'll certainly be wanting a reaction out of his players. Who do you think Lincoln will be looking at, and from Town's point of view, and thinking they're the danger men, they can cause us problems?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I watched what your chat with Marcus Stewart, and anything that Marcus says, carries a lot of resonance. And he talked about the dangers being the midfield, and I think he's right. I think if Andre Dazelle clicks, and I think again, I use that expression hot and cold with Crewe, and I think he is hot and cold, but you're allowed to be at that age. And as I said, I think playing in these empty stadiums isn't easy for some of the younger players, and I think maybe a little bit of experience alongside him. I think Teddy Bishop is, again, one of those players that Ipswich Town fans love and think the best of. But perhaps this is time for someone like Flynn Downs to play alongside Andre, to give a little bit more of the steel that might be needed in the middle of the park. And I think, I think Norwood up front is a fantastic threat. I was delighted when he signed for Ipswich from Tranmere, because I think certainly from the outside, and what people tell me about Ipswich is that we're too nice, we're too welcoming, we're such a happy, decent club. And we haven't got enough of those people who do the nasty stuff, the horrible stuff, and cause people problems. Norwood does that. We just haven't seen the best side of him because of all the injuries he's had. And I think he's probably the threat. I think it's 3 goals in the last 4 appearances for Ipswich, I think. Looking at him and thinking, yeah, he's the guy we've got to stop. And if we can stop Andre pulling the strings in midfield. And then there are unknowns there. If he plays Guion Edwards, we've seen a lot of him early on the season causing real problems. There are plenty of threats there. I think the problem is that Paul Cook's probably looking around about 30 players and thinking, help, which is the 11 that works here? Which ones can get the results, and which ones are the freshest to do what I want to do? Because there's no doubt about it. He talked about putting his brand on the club from day one. That wasn't a Paul Cook side or Paul Cook performance at Gillingham. I think I'd be hoping that he can get one against Lincoln on Tuesday night.
Yeah, he said that just there, that you summarised about saying the number of players that are available. I think asked in the press conference earlier, and he said Ollie Hawkins is closing in on a return to training, and then he comes back, and whilst he's still trying to assess what players he's currently got available, and he said, is it either a good thing or a bad thing? Obviously he wants more players available for selection, but just the sheer amount of players that are available, he made a triple substitution at the weekend in the second half, just after Luke Chambers' equaliser, and there's plenty of options should he be wanting to freshen it up.
Yeah, I just think it's not easy. I mean, you'll be down at the training ground if you've got almost 30 players. If you're training and doing shape work, you're doing 2 sets of 11. You've still got maybe 5 or 6 players that aren't getting into that. And what do you do with them? And how do you keep them interested? And all of them are trying to make a good impression because there's a good manager, and he's talked about kind of sweeping the deck and giving everyone a kind of clean start. So it's a really difficult position. But bearing in mind, everyone's vying for a slot in that 11. They're probably busting a gut in training. So you've got the added problem of having played 6 games in 19 days. You've got the tiredness factor there. Players busting a gut, trying to make tackles. The problems of injuries coming from that. So it's not an easy situation, and you can understand why he would like to kind of cut it down, narrow it down, and think, right, I'm going to pick 11 from maybe a 22 or an 18. And I think right now he's probably trying to assess just which of the guys he can count on. And I think one thing, if it was me and I'm trying to get into the playoffs knowing that I'm 2 points off at the moment with a game in hand, I think you look for the experienced bods who get you through. And I think what we'll probably see, and I don't hold me to this because I may well be wrong, is that he brings in some of those players that have done it before, the older players who he can count on. Might not have the same sort of energy levels as some of the younger players, but might not make the same sort of mistakes either. And I think what you're looking for is more guarantees if you're trying to get the club into the playoffs by the end of the season.
We'll just finish, James, just with your score prediction, as we do with every guest on the preview. So how do you see it panning out tonight?
I hope it's going to be tight, because I was really surprised at the weekend. When the equaliser went in and Luke Chambers scores at the header, you kind of think, right, the tails are up. You can go and get this win now. And clearly the substitutions were made, didn't have a great effect on it. And suddenly you're staring at a 3-1 defeat in your first game. So for the first game at Portman Road, I think it will be a tight affair like it was at Sincil Bank. My head says it's going to be a draw. My heart says Ipswich squeak it 1-0.
So what can I push you on? What's your final prediction?
All right, we'll go with 1-0 then.
1-0. There we go.
And I do pray that they get this first game at Portman Road off to a winning start for Paul Cook, because he wants to have a smile on his face and not a glare like he had when he left the pitch at Stinsel.
Good stuff. I hope you're right. So thank you for joining us, James, on the preview. Really appreciate your time. Thank you to all the Town fans watching at home. Don't forget you can still buy your match passes on iFollow Ipswich for £10 before tonight's game. Thanks very much.